Gregg Jarrett, all about reality, not about rhetoric. Welcome to the studio.
This is unreal.
What is? In what way?
To be here with you in studio. It's been a while.
Fresh off your virtual signing with Sean Hannity last night.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a great time. People can still go to my website and they can order a signed copy of my new book, Trial of the Century.
And we're going to get to your book. I just got to ask you about this. When people listen and go, Chris Wray, what is he being held in contempt about? What is going on here? What did he do?
Defying a subpoena that was duly authorized and served on him by the House Oversight Committee, House Judiciary Committees. Both have been investigating, wrongdoing involving President Joe Biden. And, look, they have a constitutional oversight duty to look into these things, corruption in government. And if you start withholding documents, you're covering things up.
So I was just astounded to see 4 FBI agents with great backgrounds come forward 2 weeks ago and say, I'm a whistleblower. And ever since I came out and blew the whistle, which is supposed to be whistleblower protections, my careers have been ruined. We've been fired, can't get our records, can't get my gun permit if I want to go back and be a local cop and an investigator.
Right. And
they came forward about things they were not happy with in terms of this to Justice Department and what was happening at the FBI specifically. And then we have a bunch of Democrats going after their credibility and a bunch of Republicans just saying, tell me your story. And now we moved on. And I feel like their careers have been ruined. And word goes out, if you're a whistleblower, you're going to be isolated.
Well, the same mainstream media that peddled the phony Russia collusion narrative, is now taking the same position. Nothing to see here. Let's move on. They have been witting accessories to the cover-up of, Biden family influence peddling schemes that are well documented now by the House Oversight Committee.
So, by the way, people don't think James Comer's doing a good job. You just don't want to hear what he's saying. You think he's doing a great job.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
He has uncovered more information and evidence and documents, thousands of pages of wire transfers and banking records and 170-plus suspicious activity reports that the Department of Justice never revealed or didn't discover, one of the two.
So it got a couple of things. We find out about 12 family members benefiting from transactions in international business represented by Hunter and Jim Biden, but they have no product. They have no expertise, and their product is influence.
Which
one would
suggests money laundering, because you've got, a plethora of shell companies and LLCs that seem to have no other purpose, according to Chairman Comer, than to be receptacles for, tens of millions of dollars flowing into Biden-controlled accounts, then distributed to family members. And look, the law of money laundering is that if you're using these companies, which are by themselves legal, but if you're using them for an illegal purpose to hide the source of the money, that's money laundering.
So this whistleblower came in and said, I got something to say. They have found out that, according to this one FBI agent, he witnessed Joe Biden benefiting one vice president about $5 million that he made. And he went to the FBI and said, listen, I'm going to just tell you the story. And he filled out an FD 1023 form. So he goes and puts this in documentation. It says this is exactly what happened. And it gets filed away. Nothing's done about it. They go over to Congress and say, listen, this guy goes over and goes, listen, I'm telling you right now, Joe Biden personally benefited from when he was vice president off his influence campaign. And so James Comer said, what'd you do about it? Well, I wrote it down. I filled out this FD 1023 form. So we went up to the FBI. He goes, can I see that form? And Chris Wray says, no. And he says, I need it. I'm going to subpoena it. He said, I'm defying the subpoena. So here's Comer, what he's going to do now. Cut 23.
Today was the deadline. He was given 3 weeks to produce a document and go into detail on what exactly they did to investigate the validity of the document. But thus far, he won't even admit that they have the document, Sean. He's given us the runaround for 3 weeks. He's just stalling. He said there's good faith effort. They haven't produced anything. They haven't even admitted they have a document. So we don't have confidence in Director Wray. We're already in the process of drafting legislation to hold an oversight committee markup next week to hold FBI Director Wray in contempt of Congress.
So what changes if he's held in contempt? Because it's going to go to the Department of Justice, who will do nothing.
Not necessarily. There are two kinds of congressional contempt. One is criminal, one is civil. And the first is what you're referring to. If you do criminal contempt, it goes to the U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., appointed by Joe Biden, who reports to Merrick Garland, also appointed by Joe Biden. So that means the subject of the disputed document is being determined by the two people who report directly to Joe Biden, not to mention the target of the criminal contempt is Christopher Wray, who also reports to Merrick Garland and Joe Biden. So even though federal regulations require Garland to recuse himself as the attorney general and appoint somebody else, he won't do it. He has a track record of ignoring disqualifications under the law. So your other option is civil contempt. You file a lawsuit immediately. It goes to a federal judge. And if you're lucky enough to find an impartial one, I suspect that judge would say, look, you have no legal basis, Mr. Wray, to withhold this document. Congress has a constitutional duty and authority to look into acts of government corruption. Hand it over.
And it astounds me that a guy appointed by Donald Trump to replace James Comey, who was recommended to him by Chris Christie, and you said Rod Rosenstein.
And Jeff Sessions.
And Jeff Sessions would be such an obstructionist to a Republican Congress.
You know, look, Donald Trump was a Washington outsider. He wasn't connected to people in Washington, D.C. He relied on advice for appointments. Some of the advice was horrible. Any advice you get from Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein is inherently suspect. And he relied on their recommendations, and Chris Christie appointed, Christopher Wray, whose only goal as director of the FBI, it seems to me, is to cover up wrongdoing within the FBI.
So let's talk about your book. It's now out this week. It's called Trial of the Century. And this looks at the famous 1925 Scopes monkey trial. Tell us the relevance it has today.
Well, it established and helped solidify some of the cherished constitutional rights, including free speech, that we enjoy today. You have to remember, almost 100 years ago at the time of this trial, America was on the precipice, staring into this abyss of censorship. They were banning books on things like evolution. In Tennessee, they made it a crime for a school teacher to teach evolution out of the state-approved textbook that had a chapter on a young man. A school teacher was arrested. The greatest trial lawyer who ever lived, Clarence Darrow, volunteered to defend him. The prosecutor in the case was William Jennings Bryan, three-time presidential nominee, who is the fundamentalist leader who helped get that law passed. So you have this titanic clash in this tiny town of Dayton, Tennessee, between two epic figures in America. The first trial broadcast live on radio to a riveted nationwide audience.
And who is Clarence Darrow's client?
John Scopes, 25-year-old school teacher. And the climactic event occurred when Darrow, realizing the jury was stacked against him and so was the judge, knew he was losing the case and decided to roll the dice. And he called the prosecutor, William Jennings Bryan, to the witness stand as an expert on the Bible. And the judge said, you can't do that. You can't call the prosecutor. And Bryan stands up and says, Your Honor, I have nothing to fear. I'll testify. Wow. Bryan was destroyed in a withering, decimating cross-examination by Clarence Darrow. And that moment in history was a sea change. It ended the suffocation of intellectual empowerment and academic autonomy and free speech.
But it's about where we came from. I mean, fundamentally where the human race came from, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Darrow's argument, and he had a dozen theologians and scientists renowned the world over there in Dayton, Tennessee, to testify that these two concepts of evolutionary theory and creationism are actually harmonious. They do not conflict. Evolutionary theory does not undermine.
So they should be allowed to teach it.
That's right. And, that's the position of most religions today. The Pope has said evolution presupposes creationism. And that was Darrow's argument all along.
All right, Greg, you have a few more minutes?
Yeah, of course. For you, any
Allison, is it okay if we hold him over? Because this is big audition.
She's nodding her head. Audition?
This was an audition. And just like Carson, remember Johnny Carson would decide if the comedian was good enough to sit on the couch?
Yeah.
I like you to stay, but Allison, you ultimately have the decision. Do you want, yes? She's nodding yes.
She's nodding her head.
Again, I was all in.
I'd like to audition for American Idol if that's possible.
I don't have any pull with that, but it's good to have aspirations. I think they're looking for somebody younger with musical ability.
I was the lead in Guys and Dolls in high school, if that gives you any sense of my vocal ability.
Do you have the VHS tape I could look at in the break?
They had no VHS back
Not even back then? All right, so I'm going to say no. I'm going to send you home.
Okay, all right.
Back in a moment.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.